September. The first topic we need to cover is Arctic amplification. A new recent study points out that Arctic is heating 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. This effect has wide-ranging impact, including on monsoon. Scientists have termed it Arctic amplification. Now let's talk about polar and Arctic amplification. Global warming has hastened due to anthropogenic forces or human activities since pre-industrial times and has increased the planet's average temperature by 1.1 degrees Celsius. Now, polar amplification is that any change in the surface area temperature and the net radiation balance tends to produce larger changes at north and south poles. This phenomena is known as polar amplification. With respect to Arctic amplification, the above changes are more pronounced in northern latitudes than in the southern latitudes. This is known as Arctic amplification. Now, the warming is more concentrated in the Eurasian part of the Arctic, where Barents Sea, north of Russia and Norway is. And this region is warming 7 times faster than the global average. This is also affecting monsoon and climate conditions around the world. Now let's move on to the causes of polar and Arctic amplification. Now the primary causes are ice albedo feedback, lapse rate feedback, water vapor feedback, ocean heat transport. Among these, ice albedo feedback and lapse rate feedback are responsible for 40 and 15% of the polar amplifications respectively. That means they collectively are responsible for 55% of the polar amplification. Now what exactly is ice albedo feedback? Now sea ice and snow have high albedo, implying that they are capable of reflecting most of the solar radiations compared to water and ice. Global warming is resulting in diminishing sea ice. Now, as the ice melts, Arctic oceans will be capable of absorbing more solar radiations. Now, what is lapse rate feedback? It says that temperature drops with elevation, that is the lapse rate, decreases with warming. What are the consequences of Arctic amplification? Now, the consequences are that the cause can be consequence too. That means that Arctic amplifications are cyclic in nature. The consequences of Arctic amplification is on the Greenland ice sheet. There is impact on biodiversity as well as there is impact on permafrost. For Greenland ice sheet, the Greenland's old and thicker ice sheets are getting replaced by young and thinner ice sheets. In 2019, the melting of this ice sheet was the single biggest cause for rise in sea level, about 1.5 meters. Now the Greenlandic ice sheets hold about the second largest amount of ice after Antarctica. Impact on biodiversity is that Arctic Ocean results in acidification of water by changing the salinity levels. This impacts biodiversity and many dependent species. It also increases the amount of rainfall, and this is affecting the availability and accessibility license to reindeer. This is causing widespread starvation and death among the Arctic fauna. Now, impact on permafrost goes like that the permafrost in Arctic is releasing carbon and methane, which are among the major greenhouse gases responsible for global warming. Now, the melt will also release long dormant bacteria and viruses that were trapped in permafrost and can potentially give rise to diseases. Now, let's look at the impacts of Arctic amplification on India. Now, the Arctic amplification has impact on India in the sense that influences the Indian monsoon. Now, a study has found that the reduced ice on the Barents-Kara Sea region can lead to extreme rainfall events in the later half of the monsoon in India. Now, this is due to the atmospheric circulation changes combined with warm temperatures in Arabian Sea, which is contributing to enhanced moisture and drive extreme rainfall events. Now, Arctic ice and sea level rise in the Indian scenario is that the Indian coast is rising faster than the global average rate, and it is primarily due to the ice melting in the Arctic region. Now let's move on to Earth Ganga, government's new model for sustainable development of Ganga. The Director General of National Mission for Clean Ganga spoke about Earth Ganga model during the Stockholm World Water Week 2022. Now let's talk about the Earth Ganga. Now in 2019, Prime Minister first introduced the concept of Earth Ganga during the National Ganga Council, where he urged for a shift from Namami Gange, that is cleaning of Ganga, to a model of Earth Ganga. Now Earth Ganga focuses on sustainable development of Ganga by focusing on economic activities related to the rivers. It also strives to contribute at least 3% of the GDP from the Ganga basin itself. Under the Earth Ganga, the government is working on 6 verticals. The first vertical is related to zero budget natural farming. It involves chemical free farming on 10 kilometers on either side of the river and promotion of cow dung as fertilizers through the Gobardhan scheme. The second vertical relates to monetization and reuse of sludge and wastewater. It seeks to reuse treated water for irrigation industries and revenue generations through urban local bodies. Livelihood generation opportunities by creating hearts where people can sell local products, medicinal plants, and Ayurveda. It also seeks to increase public participation by increasing synergies between the stakeholders involved with the river. It wants to promote the cultural heritage and tourism of Ganga and its surrounding through boat tourism, adventure sports, and conducting yoga activities. It also wants to promote institutional buildings by empowering local administration for improved water governance. Now let's move on to the third topic, which is Getting India to Net Zero report. Now let's move on to the Getting India to Net Zero report. The High Level Policy Commission on Getting Asia to Net Zero has released a report titled Getting India to Net Zero. The High Level Policy Commission on Getting India to Net Zero was constituted by Asia Society Policy Institute, which is a New York based think tank. The objective is to accelerate Asia's transition to net zero emissions while ensuring that the region thrives and prospers through this transition. Now let's look at the key findings of the report. The report says that if India transitions to net zero by 2070, it could boost its annual GDP by 4.7% by 2036. It will be able to create 15 million new jobs by 2047, and it will require an investment of around $10.1 trillion. Now, if India is to achieve net zero by 2050, the GDP gains could reach 7.3% per annum, and it could create nearly 20 million additional jobs by 2032. And for this, India would need an additional investment of around $13.5 trillion. There will be a decent impact of ending coal use, and for this, it has suggested that ending new coals as soon as possible by 2023 and transitioning from unabated coal power use by 2040 would be particularly impactful to get India to net zero emissions sooner. Now, the report has also acknowledged the significant resources needed for India to transition to a clean economy, and the foremost challenge being finance. If finance is not available, there would be significant strain on the domestic economy. Let's move on to the fourth topic, which is Battery Waste Management Rules of 2022. The Ministry of Environment has notified the Battery Waste Management Rules 2022. Now, the aim of the Battery Waste Management Rules of 2022 is to ensure environmentally sound management of waste batteries, and it is going to replace the 2001 rules. This rule will cover all types of batteries, which is electric vehicle batteries, portable batteries, automotive batteries, and industrial batteries. Now, the key provisions of the rules include extended producer responsibility, polluter pay principles, industries for waste batteries, and use of recycled materials for new batteries. A centralized online portal is also to be created to enable the exchange for extended producer responsibility certificates. So the significance of the new rules of 2022 is that sustainable battery management would increase India's push for electric vehicles. The new rules will bring new technologies and investment in recycling and refurbishment. It will help reduce the dependency on new raw materials and save natural resources. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is greening of India's coal sector. The Ministry of Coal has taken several initiatives to support India's climate targets. Now, the greening initiative of the India's coal sector means that the industry is aiming to promote a sustainable model of development. To fulfill this aim, coal production will be coupled with protection of environment, conservation of natural resources, care for society, and measures to protect forest and wildlife. Initiatives taken is that the Ministry of Coal has set up a goal to bring more than 2,400 hectares of area in and around coalfield under green cover. Now for this, it has identified areas including reclaimed mined out areas of coal companies and areas outside of leasehold. Now this green initiative of the coal sector will support India's nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, which is to create an additional sink of around 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent through additional forest and tree cover by 2030. Now let's move on to the sixth topic, which is the State of Climate Report. This is the 32nd Annual State of Climate Report. The report has been compiled by National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, published by the American Meteorological Survey Society. Now this report points out 2021 as a year of extremes and rapid swings, bringing both record highs and lows. So let's look at the key findings of the report. The report says that greenhouse gas concentrations are the highest in 2021. Year 2021 was amongst the 6 warmest years. Sea level rose for the 10th year in a row. It also says that Antarctica has been losing 140 to 160 billion tons of ice each year since 1993. In 2021, it only lost 50 billion tons because the continent also experienced an unusual high number of extreme weather events that brought large dump of snow to the inland areas. In the Arctic, it has been the coolest year since 2013, but 2021 was still the 13th warmest year in 122-year record. Now, La Nina conditions that began in the mid of 2020 continued for the most of 2021, which means that the global sea surface temperature in 2021 was lower than that both of 2019 and 2020 due to La Nina, but still higher than the 1991 and 2020 averages. Also, there has been an increase in the tropical cyclones, which is to say that 97 tropical cyclones were recorded in 2021, which is way above the average of 87 recorded in the preceding period of 1991 to 2020.